The Cincinnati Red Stockings, now known as the Cincinnati Reds, became the first professional baseball team. They've had quite the history: 5 World Series championships, 9 National League pennants, some of the greatest players of all time like Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Pete Rose, Frank Robinson, Barry Larkin, Joey Votto, and more. Some of the greatest teams of all time, like the Big Red Machine that dominated the National League in the 70s and won back-to-back World Series in 1975 and 1976. These days, though, the Reds aren't producing the same kind of results. Over the last 20 years, we've seen this Reds franchise have their ups and their downs, but it looks like we're on the cusp of quite the up in Reds franchise history. Back in the 90s, the Reds had their ups and also had their downs. After starting the decade in strong fashion, winning the World Series over the Oakland A's in 1990, as well as making it to the NLCS in 1995, they would fail to make the playoffs in every other season that decade. In fact, after making it to the NLCS in 1995, the Reds would go on to miss the playoffs for the next 14 seasons. During this downtime, though, they would cultivate some good talent through the MLB draft and other avenues, despite having 4 different general managers from 2000 to 2010. While the Reds did make some splashes in the trade market and draft, trading for Ken Griffey Jr. in 2000 and drafting Adam Dunn in 2002, they would eventually be traded later on in their Reds tenures. The Reds found success with other players, though, drafting Joey Votto in 2002, Homer Bailey in 2004, and Jay Bruce in 2005. They also brought in Bronson Arroyo in 2006 via the free agent market, who would end up having a solid 9-year tenure with the Reds. They also made some trades that brought in key players like Brandon Phillips, Scott Rowland, and Matt Latos. One trade, well, 2 trades that garnered a lot of attention involved Josh Hamilton, the former number 1 pick of the Tampa Bay Rays back in the 1999 draft, who ran into a lot of off-the-field issues that involved drugs and alcohol, and an arrest that involved him smashing a friend's car windshield. After multiple suspensions and being out of the game of baseball, he was eventually selected by the Chicago Cubs in the Rule 5 draft, who would then turn around and trade him to the Reds. When selected in the Rule 5 draft, the team that has the player must keep him on their major league roster. Hamilton would go on to have success in his rookie season in 2007, but was then traded to the Texas Rangers in the offseason due to concerns of his durability for highly touted pitching prospect Edinson Volquez, who was later traded for the earlier mentioned Matt Latos. They even went out into the international free agent market and won the sweepstakes for the highly coveted arm of Aroldis Chapman, beating out a long list of teams that included the Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, Cardinals, Mets, Angels, Orioles, A's, Blue Jays, Cubs, White Sox, and probably even the Portland Pickles. They also added Johnny Cueto from the Dominican Republic back in 2004. All of these pieces did lead the Reds to a couple of division championships and a wild card game appearance from 2010 to 2013, but the Reds would be ousted early on in each of those playoff appearances. From 2014 to 2019, the Reds would experience another drought of playoff appearances, as well as trade away most of their core players minus Joey Votto, and finished each season under 500. They would, however, be making noise behind the scenes and in the minor leagues, as they would go on to make many key additions to the organization via the draft. Jesse Winker in 2012, who we'll get back to here soon, Tyler Stevenson and Alexis Diaz in 2015, current utility man Nick Senzel back in 2016, and also their current center fielder TJ Friedl as a non-drafted free agent that year as well. In 2017, they drafted their current ace, Hunter Green. In 2018, they drafted their current second baseman and 2021 Rookie of the Year, Jonathan India. In 2019, they drafted Nick Lodolo and Graham Ashcraft, who look to be key rotation pieces for the Reds in the foreseeable future once they come off the IL. They also traded for Eugenio Suarez from the Tigers back in 2014, who I'll also get back to here shortly. While the Reds did have decent teams in 2020 and 2021 with good players that included Cy Young winner Trevor Bauer, who eventually signed with the Dodgers, and Nick Castellanos, who eventually signed with the Phillies, they would go on to have little success, minus a wild card appearance in the 2020 shortened season playoffs. We even saw Dick Williams resign as president of baseball operations, paving the way for current president Nick Krall. After the 2021 season, this is when Reds fans really grew frustrated with ownership. The Reds were not interested in retaining the likes of Trevor Bauer or Nick Castellanos, as well as trading away the earlier mentioned Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez to the Mariners, Sonny Gray to the Twins, and Amir Garrett to the Royals to save on payroll. While some of these trades did bring in some solid prospects, including their current number 8, 10, and 11 prospects, Chase Petty, Connor Phillips, and Brandon Williamson, who is currently pitching in the Reds rotation, and even fan favorite Jake Fraley from the Mariners and the Winker and Suarez trade, fans felt the team wasn't really interested in winning, and many were calling for the sale of the franchise. Reds president Phil Castellini would clap back at the fans, asking,
well, where are you going to go? Let's start there. I mean, sell the team to who? I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, you want to have this debate. If you want to look at what would you do with this team to have it be more profitable, make more money, compete more in the current economic system that this game exists, it would be to pick it up and move it somewhere else. Yeah. And so be careful what you ask for.
He would go on to say in a follow-up to those comments, asking Reds fans if they're going to abandon the team, that they hadn't abandoned the team and the community, and for Reds fans to settle down, celebrate the current team, and despite people hating on the franchise, they weren't going anywhere. Castellini would go on to apologize in the future, saying he regretted the comments, that they love the city, the team, and the fans. While this was a tough time for Reds fans, young players like Hunter Greene, Nick Lodolo, Tyler Stevenson, and Jonathan India were starting to emerge. The Reds also made a solid draft pick of Matt McLain in 2021, setting the stage for the team to finish their overhaul in 2022. By the trade deadline in 2022, the Reds shipped off their best pitcher, Luis Castillo, which brought in a massive haul that includes their current number 2 and 3 prospects, Noelvi Marte and Edwin Arroyo, as well as the number 14 prospect Levi Stout, who has contributed a little bit already to this year's team. They also traded Tyler Mahle to the Twins, and in return they received Spencer Steer, who's turned into a key piece for the Reds this year, as well as their current number 7 prospect Christian Encarnacion Strand. They made a couple other trades as well, involving Brandon Drury and Tyler Naquin, which brought back their current number 16 prospect Victor Acosta and number 26 prospect Hector Rodriguez. The biggest move of all, though, came back in 2018 when the Reds signed 16-year-old Elly De La Cruz out of the Dominican Republic. Elly De La Cruz is a player that has it all. A bat that can hit for average as well as power, speed, a smooth glove, a player with an incredibly high ceiling that the Reds can build around for years to come. So how did the Reds turn this around? Well, instead of focusing on high-priced players, they focused on the draft with an emphasis on drafting athletic players as well as quality pitchers, building up not just the top of their farm, but the back end of it as well, and simply put, player development. With the rise of young players, including players selected in the MLB draft, the emergence of one of baseball's top prospects, Elly De La Cruz, as well as the construction of one of the best farm systems in baseball, the Reds have started to show their potential as a team that could be a menace for years to come. All of a sudden, even after many years of frustration, the Reds feel fun again. Will we see something like the Big Red Machine back from the 70s? Who knows? But what we do know is the Reds are on the rise again.